Right. Welcome, everybody, to why design is the most unsung hero for successful Salesforce implementations. A little bit about me. I am Pallavi Agarwal, CEO and founder of Candor Consult, a Salesforce consulting firm. And, before I started the company, I was always and have always been, and till this day, I am a design architect at heart and always will be. And that's where my 18 years of experience lie in my consulting. I've worked with global enterprise customers to working with small nonprofits and small businesses. I'm a design ambassador. I like to globally speak, hence I flew in from DC all the way here, and try to write some blogs to help provide resources for our groups. Mentor, coach, you can read the rest, but the fun parts of my life is I love traveling, I love hiking, and I love snowboarding. So I try to find ways to incorporate that into my lifestyle. So we're here to talk about design, but I'm not sure from an architect perspective how many of you really know about the design fundamentals. So let's first make sure we're all on the same page in terms of design fundamentals. So growing up in consulting, I was always working in technology, building custom technology for different organizations from federal governments to Fortune 100s at enterprise level, global level. And I always thought design was something that was separate because we always talked about technology and business, but design was never really talked about. Little did I know that the stuff I was doing was really core with the design, because at the end of the day, if we build a mansion and no one wants to live in it, what's the point? And that's really where design thinking came through over and over. In all the deliveries that I led, my focus really became that everything we build, we want to build in a way that people are using it, not just for one type of user, but multiple users. And also, we all don't do something the same way. So also building flexibility. So we are all designers in the Salesforce ecosystem, whether you believe it or not. And what really makes an architect go from good to great is really leveraging the ability of design thinking to make solutions that last. How are we going to build something that is going to continue to scale and grow with our user base? What models are we using? Are we creating less tech debt? So really thinking about that, whether you're in a consulting space or even in-house as you're building out your solutions, really thinking about the positive outcomes and how they're going to be the long-standing solutions. So design thinking really requires you to consider where the organization's going, what are their brands, their services, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what are they trying to achieve, what is their visions and goals, and really keeping that in the back of your mind as you're solutioning. You're also wanting to understand the context and the external environments to ensure that you can help the companies as you're building those solutions really stay ahead of the market in a competitive way, as well as really get to know the users who are going to be using it. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of times the requirements we get or the asks that we get is from top down, and the people that are using it is at a different level. So they not always have the understanding of what their people are actually doing in an org and just asking for this big ask. So you really want to make sure you're really looking at the 10,000-foot level as well as a 100-foot level. So as you're designing, design thinking really is a lot of emotional things as well. So this was brought in from Stanford as a design boot camp. So a lot of this, the slides that you're going to see, is really from design thinking from Stanford and what they're teaching throughout. And I attended that boot camp, and I found it to be very beneficial for the stuff we do, in the sense that, as we're talking about design thinking, it's really all of this. But it's not in a flow, in a linear way. You can be at any point and have to go back to empathy or defining or ideating or prototyping or testing. So you're constantly bouncing around and really trying to figure out, do these solutions work for every user or every persona that you're defining? Is this going to last long? Does this meet the visions and the goals of the company? Does it meet what a CEO or an executive leader is looking for versus the day-to-day person who's doing their job? So that's where you're trying to ideate, define, empathize, and then try to build prototypes, test them out, and go back and constantly do that cycle. So while you're doing all of that, you first need to start thinking about the business problem versus solutioning right away. And I will tell you, I have worked with architects pretty much all my life. And the first thing an architect does is, oh, I know how to solve it. I know how to build it. But I'm like, I haven't given you the full requirements yet. I haven't told you about everything. So the good to great part is those architects who do stop and say, but why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? What is the business problem that we're trying to solve for, not the technical. The technical comes later, right? Because at the end of the day, each business that we're building the systems for are unique. So you really want to think through, are you considering the user interaction? Is it going to be ready for adoption? Is it easy for people to be using it, or are they going to get frustrated? Are we building it in a way that's going to have low tech debt and also consider the front end? And I'm not just talking about the UI piece. A lot of people confuse front end from a looks and feels cosmetic perspective, which we call UI. It's also the user experience. So think of when you wake up, everyone has a different routine, but everyone wakes up. Everyone does things differently. Like you may do something and have a cup of coffee or tea before you brush your teeth. Some people might brush their teeth before they have a cup of tea or coffee. You're doing the same activities, but in different ways. So you want to make sure you're also really thinking through how you're designing for the users in different ways and building that flexibility. And you always want to consider the best design for the users. So one thing to keep in mind is, and we call it 80-20 rule. Does it work for 80% of the people? If it does, then that's the path you want to go versus designing for the 20%. Now, the caveat to that is the 20%, if it's critical to the business and there are special use cases and it's key part of the business, that's when you want to customize and really think through how to build for that 20%. But really, you want to keep it at the 80-20 rule. So you do that by thinking about the what and how. You diverge the problem. You sometimes converge the problem. You might converge the problem and then diverge the solution. You might diverge the problem and converge the solution. So you want to walk through these paths and really think through, like, what are we designing it for? Who are we designing it for? And how is this really going to benefit the business as a whole? And what is the adoption going to look like? And keeping these concepts in mind will really help you continue to build those solutions that you're already, with your wheels churning, designing. But remember to keep asking those questions. Other things are like, a lot of times we get, okay, I'm an architect, I'm not a designer. But architects are the key designers. Think of building a house. Architects are the key to building a house because they lay down the blueprint and really put things in perspective of the foundation. Where are the beams going to go, the main frames, and all of that to make sure the house is sturdy. We know which ones are the load-bearing beams, which ones are the drywall that we can knock down if we need to, and things like that. But when you're putting down a blueprint as an architect, you're not really going to be changing it that much. You might change the design inside of it or the use of the rooms that you're designing and how and the aesthetics. But the foundation and that blueprint really stays. So an architect is one of the main designers in our ecosystem. And that, if you really think through that, that'll lead to a lot of successful implementation. So how do you get started with that? You start with discovery as an architect first, right? You start thinking about, okay, what are the industries? What is the research that we've done? Are there KPIs and things that we need to look into that are going to be very beneficial? Are there personas we need to identify? So I kind of mentioned the 10,000 foot versus the 100 foot. 10,000 foot, I'll give you an example. When I was working with the federal government, just coming out of college, we sat with some of the top executives, and they gave us all the requirements. And we sat in a room, and we built a solution, because this was when waterfall was the best way. And now we do Wagile, not Agile. But we did this whole thing, and we built it based on the requirements we were given by the executives. And then when we went into UAT, we flew in the actual users who were going to be using the system globally. And every single one of them was like, this isn't how we do this. This isn't how our office does it. Antwerp does it differently than Miami, than Baltimore, than Seattle. And now we're like, oh my gosh, we have to go live in 2 months, and now we have to redo the entire custom system. So that's where, identifying those personas are really important up front to help build that foundation and the blueprint for your designs. KPIs are super important because at the end of the day, we're building and capturing all the data to really ensure that we can make informed decisions in the future. So what does that really look like? So we always talk to different leaders, different users in our group, and ask, like, what are you measuring? Why are we doing this? What are you looking for? What is the data that matters to you? Because that needs to be part of your foundational architecture as well. And that's also design. Then you want to maybe interview a few folks in different departments to really understand the use cases and the user stories. Look at what the industries are doing. So for some of our customers, some of the things we bring in is, hey, we know you're a nonprofit in this segment. What we've seen in the industry for similar nonprofits, here's what they're doing, here's some of the best practices. And bringing that knowledge to the table really helps build those systems. Doing some research, and then, of course, identifying your deliverables, right? Really thinking through, like, what is it that I'm going to be building that is going to be used to them? Is this house, if we go back to the blueprint example, is this the house that they were asking for? And thinking through that. So another part is the UI brain and the UX brain. So as I mentioned, UI, UX usually gets combined into one word. We use it very like, oh, UI, UX, but they're actually two different things. And the UI side is like your visual designs, the colors, the graphics, the layouts, the typography. And the UX part is really where the architect piece comes in, right? What is the interaction going to look like? How's the data capture going to be? What are the wireframes and prototypes? What type of information architecture are we going to build? Data taxonomy, all of those things, identifying those scenarios and really building a solution around it. That's what will take you from good to great in terms of being an architect, keeping design in mind. Because at the end of the day, we are all designers, even if we don't know it yet. So little tips on how to think like a designer. Keep thinking about who are you solving it for. And it's not always just one person or one type of department. Even if marketing comes to you and says, hey, I need a campaign or journey build, yes, that might be the person or the people asking for that request, but it's broader than that, right? Why is marketing asking for that? Oh, because we actually report out to the board of directors. We have marketing strategies that we need to talk to finance. We need budgets, and now it's beyond marketing. So thinking of things like that, of like, who are we solving the problem for? Can the solution make things easier? Because we've also had times where we've built solutions in the past that now take users longer to do the same task, and they get frustrated, and then the user adoption is not there. So then it wouldn't be called a successful implementation. You also want to think about the complexity of, like, how complex is the back end? Like, the front end may look great, the user experience might be great, but if the back end maintenance and the tech debt is really high, that might not also be the best solution. So you really have to think about the front end and the back end successfully. And really, like, does it meet the goals? There's a lot of times where, you know, we're talking about AI and all these capabilities, all these new tools and gadgets that constantly come out, and we want to test them out as architects and start using them and build them and add them to our solutions, but do we really need it? Is it really going to add to the success of the asks that we have? So thinking through things like that. And then sometimes we actually bring designers to our team, especially when we need to do wireframing and prototyping to get a concept out. A lot of our customers are more visual, so showing them something by building something quickly in a sandbox or designing something, like sometimes we even just draw it out on a whiteboard to be like, this is what we're thinking, what do you think? And you get so many more ideas that way. So making sure you have that visual aspect as well to get the right team members to bring the expertise. By the way, whoever's partying out there sounds amazing. So music's awesome. So in conclusion, right, stop solutioning and start designing first. Really think through the requirements. Really think about that blueprint you're going to put together. That blueprint is not your solution. That blueprint is more of a design of how you might solution it. So one of the things that we also do is we try to not ask our customers to talk about technology at all. And we say, let's talk about business. What is your business needs? What are your business processes? What are you trying to achieve as a business? And from there, if they start talking, or sometimes I'm guilty and as a design architect, so like, oh, maybe we'll do a pick list. And my team's like, stop, we're solutioning out. We're still talking about design, right? So building that blueprint and catching yourself, because I'm guilty of it as well. And then just implementing something scalable that's personalized. So every customer has their business in a different way. Yes, Salesforce is a very powerful tool, and that's why we love Salesforce, because it can do so much. But remember that what one business does is not exactly going to be a cookie cutter approach for the next one. So making it scalable and personalized for them is really going to make that difference and really keep that user adoption and usability and the love for Salesforce. That's why our clients keep using Salesforce today, because we've made it easier for them. We've really thought through the business as well as how they're going to continue to scale and grow with it. So that's why I think design thinking is always in the forefront and the core of every implementation that we do. So just a few quick QR codes. This one will give you a lot of resources. So if you want design resources, there's some articles, there's ways to get connected to the Salesforce design community and uncover some other resources that we've designed as a company. Okay. Make sure everyone's got that. And we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to open it up for questions. I know there were some questions on the app. I'm going to try to pull those up, but if anyone has questions live, I would love them. Yes?
You talked about divergent and convergent problems and solutions. So you talked about divergent and convergent problems and solutions. Could you give us an example of those?
Yeah, so this one's really loud. So for divergent conversion, right? Divergent is like going out, converging is bringing it back in. So for diverging, like sometimes what we'll do is talk to multiple people about that problem and then come back and try to converge a solution based on that. And sometimes we'll start with talking to one group to understand the problem and then go out to different people to test out the solution. So that's what we're talking about. Like, when does it make sense to go out and start with a broader perspective and then bring it back? And when does it make sense to start small and then take it out? Any other questions? Yes.
Do you think there is a minimum size in terms of company or team to implement design thinking system, or is it like more suitable for 50 to 100 company persons?
Yeah, so Candor is a lean team. So we usually have maybe 2 to 3 people who will do an entire global implementation, whether it's an enterprise level or a small business. The way we do it is really, if you focus on that design piece first, the architect and the BA work together there. You sometimes need a PM, but if a BA can be the PM, then we sometimes only have 2 people. And having the architect in those design sessions and really talking through those business processes makes a huge difference, because then the architect can take all of that information and really put that blueprint together. From there, when we're ready to build, we might expand the team to 1 or 2 more people based on timelines. But I have done global implementations with even CPQ with a 4 or 5 person team.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You didn't use the term usability in your presentation. Where do you put it? How would you define it in the process?
In the process, I think it's everywhere, right? So back in the day when we used to do the waterfall approach, they would do change management. Do you guys remember that term? Change management. I think it's called human-centered design now, or human-centered experience. But change management was always the last thing. And so many projects failed because of that. Because change is hard. Change is hard for any human. It's just the psyche. So usability really comes in the beginning and stays throughout. It doesn't go away, right? Because if we think about coffee, everyone might drink coffee, but I like mine black. Some people want sugar. Some people want Splenda or a sugar substitute, things like that. So usability really stays throughout as you're testing. You're constantly meeting people, you're interviewing, you're building, And UAT, if you do true UAT, a lot of usability comes out in that one. And that's why you want to also, when you're planning your delivery lifecycle, even in an agile way, want to keep that testing side much bigger, because that's where you're really going to start getting real requirements. Because as they start touching the system, they're like, oh wait, I didn't tell you about this one other thing, which is really important to my job. So usability kind of stays throughout. I hope I answered your question. Anyone else? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.